Hello, this is Kevin from SDM Software. I want to walk through and string together some examples, some demos of some PowerShell commands, PowerShell commandlets related to Active Directory. These are related to the session that I delivered at Spice World 2015 in Austin, sort of supplemental, but I wanted to walk through this stuff. Now, what I talked about sort of generally in that session was how, from a management perspective, Active Directory spans from very large, vast sort of breadth objects like your forest down to individual objects or metadata or data on objects, parameter properties, what have you. So all the way from forests and sites to domains to organizational units to users and computers and printers and file systems and file shares and what have you, you're going to need to be able to manage these things, and you're going to need to be able to interact with them from a PowerShell perspective. So one of the tricky things is getting started. Where do you start if you're not completely familiar with what you're doing, if you're not completely familiar with this area of management? So from an Active Directory perspective, we can start with something called get module. Now, these modules are essentially bags of commands or bags of commandlets. So if I say get module name Active Directory, it's only going to be there, by the way, if I've already called it. So there's some tricky things here. But if I want to say get module Active Directory, I'm going to find some good information on this module itself. Version information might be helpful. Of course, what commands are available in there are helpful. There's a lot of good data that you may need at one point or another. But we don't typically, or I don't typically go directly there. I use this get command commandlet, which we talked about in a previous demo on the help system. But get command using module as a switch and saying Active Directory, if I'm typing correctly. And I can see all of the commandlets or commands that are available to me. Now I can also, as you may have noticed in the past, I can also measure the outcome of this commandlet. Get all the commands from the Active Directory module, tell me some information about it. So here I can see there are 147 commands available to me. So let me narrow that down a bit. And now I want to say only show me the commands where the verb is get. So get information. If I want to do that, I'm going to see that there are 43 commandlets to help me retrieve information from AD. What if that is set? There are 30 commandlets that allow me to directly set data in AD. Okay, so the get command, get module, they're going to be helpful to get you started, to get you to explore. So again, I go back to get command, Active Directory. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm going to format this wide into, format this wide into 3 columns so that I can see them right next to each other pretty quickly. And I can see there's a whole string of things that I can work with here. Let's start at the top. I'm going to go back to, let's say the verb is get, the noun I had mentioned before I wanted to work with forests. Let's see if there is a forest. Use some wildcards. Okay, there's a get 80 forest. If I just go get 80 forest, that might give me some interesting information. I can see what partitions are in that forest. I can see the domain naming master, and I can see the schema master, so some single master operators. Where are the partitions contained in that forest? What is the object that contains those partitions? What global catalog servers exist? And most importantly, what's the forest functional level? And it says forest mode here. Good information on the forest, very important things that you'll work with. But if I want to jump down to and get more data out of the forest. If you've been doing Active Directory management for a long time, do you remember root DSE? Root DSE is a bunch of metadata about how your directory is going to be configured. You used to get this through the LDP tool or other mechanisms, maybe directly through ADSI edit, or sorry, directly through ADSI. But for you old school folks, also very interesting. Domain controller functionality, functionality levels, service names, etc., etc. So the root DSE information still available, exposed through PowerShell. Let's look at the next level down from the forest. Let's look at the domain. So again, I can guess at this point. I had get AD forest. Maybe there's get AD domain. Right, so there's a very logical process here, so you can start to think ahead of yourself because you're getting comfortable with the semantics that are in place in these specific modules. So for this get AD domain, there's a lot of info here. I don't know if that's all of the info. Remember, I can always say format list asterisk, show me everything. In case I miss something or in case they're not delivering something or returning something to the screen by default. One of the things in get AD domain that I find really interesting is this guy here, computers container. Notice CN computers and users container, if I notice this at the bottom. CN equals users, DC equals psycho, DC equals local, right? So those two containers are the default. That means when you create a user, it goes into the user's container. When you create a computer, it goes into the computer's container. I'm going to get ahead of myself here for a second, but if I say new user, let's say test one, sorry, new AD user, test one, and then get AD user, identity test one, I can see that this user is in the users container by default. I didn't tell it to put it there. I didn't tell AD to put that there. I just said create this user, and it created it in that default container. Let me remove that. Yes. All right. So going back to get AD domain, here's a really interesting tip here. I want to change that user's container from the default to something that I would like to use. And I have another container possibly that I'm going to use in my environment. And let's see, I'll show you this from the GUI so I don't have to get ahead of myself. So I'm going to go in psycho users, and let's just put all of my users in there. If I want to look at the properties of this object itself, of course, if I have my advanced features turned on, let's see. Come on, Kev, you can do it. This is my distinguished name. OU equals psycho users, DC equals psycho, DC equals com, right? So that's what I want. That's where I want this to go. There's an old school command that Microsoft provided a long time ago called reader CMP, reader USR. And it's super easy. So if I say, let's see, where am I? Windows System 32, I believe. Reader CMP, reader USR. I'm going to do reader USR, psycho users. Hit enter, and it says my redirection was successful. If I say get AD domain again, my user's container is now my psycho user. So if I say new AD user, sorry, new AD user test1, and then say get AD user test1. Look at that. So now I can immediately apply GP settings and what have you to newly created objects. So getADDomain was able to return that info for me. Redir USR was able to change the default location on the directory. And now, I've done what I need to do. So let me reverse out of that just to clean up my environment as I'm working. Remove AD user. Now that user is gone. And I want to say, I'm going to go back to cn users, comma, dc equals psycho, comma, dc equals local. Redirection was successful. Get AD domain. And I can see that I'm back into my users container. All right, so get AD domain, really helpful. I know I just created a few users. I know that I just sort of navigated through the GUI to get to an OU so that I could find the name of an OU. I can do those things better. But let's look at some user commandlets really quickly. Or you know what, I'm going to stop this one here. This is 10 minutes in, forest and domain. So I'll post this and then come back, users and computers, in another video. Thanks.